Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Matt Gagel. I am the Director of Programs at Montgomery History, and we are so glad you're here with us tonight. We have a great program lined up tonight, and I think you're going to really enjoy it. And we'll get started here in just a moment. Before we do, a few things I want to go over with before I introduce Emily Rogers from the Glen Echo Partnership for the Arts and Culture. First of all, if you have any questions throughout the program, please use the Q&A button. Those will come to me, and we'll be doing a Q&A session with the speaker at the end, and then we'll get to as many of those as we can. If there are any technical questions, you can, again, use the Q&A. I'll be monitoring that to make sure everything is working, and we'll try and address as many problems any problems that any problems that may arise, and get those solved for you. Also, next Tuesday evening, we'll be having a presentation by historian Sandy Heiler on the history of the front porch. One of those things that a lot of people have, but there is a surprising history behind it, and I think you'll all enjoy that presentation. I know I'm very much looking forward to it, and I think you will enjoy it. And then the last thing I have, this Saturday, we'll be doing a behind-the-scenes tour of the Button Farm. With many of you know Tony Cohen, who is the founder of the Monera Foundation, and he set up the Button Farm. I think this tour is going to be great, but it's going to be small. We're intentionally keeping it small, and there are only a few spots left. Less than a handful. So if you would like to attend that tour, visit tinyurl.com/buttonfarm, and that'll take you to our website where you can purchase tickets. But again, we only have a few spots left, so if you're interested in that, register as soon as possible. If there's enough demand, maybe we'll do it again. And I think that's all I've got. With that, I'd like to introduce Emily Rogers of the Glen Echo Park Partnership for Arts and Culture.
Thank you so much, Matt, and thank you, Montgomery History, for being our collaborator on this wonderful lecture series. As Matt said, I'm Emily Rogers, Site Operations Manager for the Glen Echo Park Partnership for Arts and Culture. Together with Montgomery County and the National Park Service, we manage the arts programs in historic buildings at Glen Echo Park, and we also operate the historic band organ and carousel that we're celebrating tonight, present art shows in our galleries, produce festivals and social dances, and lots more. With pandemic restrictions lifted, we have lots of happy kids riding the carousel, and we're presenting more in-person events, including summer concerts and carousel family days. You can find out all about what the park has to offer at glenechopark.org. I want to welcome everyone to this third lecture in our Carousel 100th Anniversary Lecture Series. We're so glad that you've joined us to learn about the history of our Wurlitzer band organ. Our months-long celebration of the Carousel Centennial would not be possible without generous support from sponsors. We're so grateful for support from Maryland Heritage Areas Authority, Maryland State Arts Council, Heritage Montgomery, Geico, Montgomery County, the National Park Service, and our longtime supporter and sponsor, Carol Treywig. Thank you to all of them for their support. Before I introduce our speaker, I also want to mention that we hope that you'll join us for the last lecture from this series on August 11th, featuring Rosa Patton, who also kind of makes a little bit of an appearance here when Durward talks about the restoration of the band organ. But Rosa was the person who did the restoration of the carousel, the 20-year-long restoration. So she will be joining us for our last lecture discussing the restoration of the carousel. We also have lots of other activities and events that are a part of the 100th anniversary celebration that we hope you'll participate in. Along with our resident music program, the Washington Conservatory of Music, we're presenting another Carousel Family Day on Saturday, July 24th, and we'll have free activities in the park all day. We also have a virtual carousel story time coming up at 9:30 a.m. this Saturday, so grab the kids and tune in. You can find all the details at glenechopark.org/carousel100. And now I'd like to introduce Durward Center to discuss Glen Echo's Wurlitzer band organ, a 50-year perspective. Durward has been the restorer and the caretaker of the organ for the last 50 years, and we are so lucky to have him as a part of the carousel and the band organ, and I just don't know what we'd do without him. In this talk, he will be talking about the history of the organ at the park, its modifications and restoration. No one knows the band organ better than Durward. We did pre-record this talk to enable an in-depth view of the band organ while it plays, but Durward is here with us to answer your questions live after this talk. So now to Durward.
Hello, I'm Durward Center. I'm pleased to be here today to help celebrate the 100-year anniversary of the Glen Echo Park Carousel and Band Organ. I've maintained the organ here for about 50 years, and I'd like to talk a little about the organ and what's been done to it over that time. When the amusement park closed in 1968, the rides were all sold off, and that included the carousel and the band organ. These items were purchased by Mr. Jim Wells over in Fairfax, Virginia. He was a dealer in vintage amusements and band organs and self-playing musical instruments. When I first came to the park in 1971, the grounds had just been taken over by the National Park Service, and things were still pretty dilapidated at that point from years of deferred maintenance by the amusement park and general abandonment. The crystal pool was still here, but with no water. The Spanish ballroom was intact. The Dodgem car, the bumper car pavilion was derelict, and the arcade buildings were missing part of the roof. However, the organ and the carousel were still here. They were still in operation, and even then, they were a sight to behold. When the amusement park first bought the carousel in 1921, they bought with it a Wurlitzer style 153 band organ for the music. Wurlitzer was the leader in America of band organ and automatic musical instrument manufacture, and their style 153 was considered a medium-sized organ. I'm sure the park owners quickly realized that a 153 organ was not nearly large enough to fill a room this size with sound. So the very next year, 1922, they upgraded and bought a Wurlitzer style 157 band organ. That's a much larger instrument and much more musically capable. That organ remained here about 4 years, and the park decided to upgrade once again in 1926. They bought a Wurlitzer style 165 duplex orchestral organ, and that's the one that has remained here since that time and is sitting right behind me. Duplex orchestral organ. That organ has 168 pipes and percussions, including a bass drum and a cymbal, a snare drum, triangle, castanets, a crash cymbal, and a set of orchestra bells. So pipe organs and band organs share a similarity. The sound is produced by wind-blown organ pipes. Of course, in a pipe organ in a church, the pipes are controlled by organists playing on a keyboard. Band organ, however, is entirely automatic. The pipe works are controlled by a perforated paper roll, much like that found in a more common player piano. For this organ, the style 165 as made, the paper roll had 69 tracks or keys. And of those 69 keys, 52 of them were devoted to musical notes, the rest for percussion and other functions of the organ. Of the 52 notes, they were arranged in 4 sections: a bass section with 6 notes, an accompaniment section with 10 notes, melody section had 22, and the trumpet section had 14. Now, these sections were not chromatic, meaning that on a musical scale, there were certain notes on the scale that the organ did not have. Organ companies did this in most organs except for the very largest ones in order to conserve space within the case. So we'll talk a little more about rolls in a few minutes. So when I first came here, the organ was playing fairly well. The tuning was somewhat less. And early on, I offered to volunteer my time in order to keep the organ playing as well as possible for its condition and as well in tune. I don't know who worked on the organ over the years. Possibly Jim Wells might have sent a mechanic over to do some maintenance in the 60s. I found that the vacuum bellows and the pressure bellows had been re-leathered certainly more than once over the years. The pneumatic stack had its valve blocks replaced with modern replacements. And in general, the type of work done was typical that could be found in the 50s and 60s on organs in amusement parks and carnivals. The organs at that time were just considered another piece of park equipment and had to be kept in operation as much as possible with little concern for historical accuracy. So I quickly realized that the organ was not playing its original music role. I learned that the organ had been converted by Wurlitzer in 1934 to play a Caliola type role. A Caliola role is a type of role that Wurlitzer made for a variety of their musical instruments in the late 20s and early 30s. The Caliola role plays 65 notes and it's fully chromatic. So conversion of a 165 is not a simple matter. A lot of pipes had to be replaced, a number of internal components had to be modified or replaced, and some components were entirely eliminated, such as the castanet action and the triangle action, because the Caliola roll had no provision to play those. The reasons for converting were probable, most likely because the Caliola rolls were then available in a greater selection of popular music, which would be important for an amusement park. And the cost per roll was considerably less for a Caliola roll versus 165 roll. So this work was done at the factory in '34, and the organ came back and played through the mid-'70s using the Caliola roll system. It played quite well, but of course it did not utilize the 165 organ to its fullest capability. By the mid-'70s, it was apparent that the organ was beginning to have problems and was going to need a restoration, major restoration in the near future. The leather, rubber, and fabric components had started to deteriorate, and the mechanical parts had a lot of wear and were becoming unreliable. So in 1974, I entered into conversations with the park about doing a restoration and converting the organ back to play 165 rolls. There were several arguments for this. Firstly, historical accuracy. With the organ playing 165 rolls, it would once again sound and operate like it did when it was new. Secondly, there was concern over the availability of the Caliola rolls. They were still being produced at that point in time by Ralph Tussing. He was up in North Tonawanda, New York. Ralph had acquired one of the Wurlitzer perforators when Wurlitzer went out of business and was making a variety of band organ rolls in limited numbers. But he was nearing retirement, and the future availability of the Caliola rolls was in question. But most importantly, new 165 rolls were again being made. A company in California called Playwright Music Roll Company specialized in reproducing vintage music rolls for the newly developing collector's market. So with these three facts in mind, the park agreed to have me restore and convert the organ back. And in 1978, I dismantled the organ and moved it to my shop in Baltimore to begin restoration. So the first thing to do as I dismantled the organ was to make an inventory of exactly what needed to be replaced, remade, or remodeled. It was apparent that 9 pipes had been replaced, the transfer block replaced, the number of internal components, including the lock and cancel unit that controls which pipes play, had been eliminated in favor of a smaller one for the Caliola roll. And some items, as I said, were eliminated, had to be remade, like the castanets, the castanet action, the triangle action, the crash cymbal and its action, and a few other internal components that control the pipe work. So once this was done, I could then have the case emptied out and turn it upside down to gain access to the bottom pipes. Most band organs have their bass pipes in the bottom. No space was left unused. And in the 165 organ, there were bass pipes and accompaniment pipes. This next picture shows a view of the bottom pipes as I found them. So 4 of these pipes were replaced during the 1934 conversion, so they had to be removed and new pipes made of the proper design and pitch. The second photo shows the new pipes. They're the ones in a lighter yellow color. Once this was done, pipework in the top of the organ that required replacement was the lowest trumpet pipe, the lowest baritone pipe, the lowest viol pipe, and 2 trombones that required modification to go back to their correct pitch. And once the pipework was done, I could then make the other missing components, such as the lock and cancel unit, and extend the transfer block and make the missing percussion actions, such as as I said, the castanet, triangle, and crash cymbal. So finally, that work was done, the conversion, so I can then begin the normal pneumatic restoration of the organ. I began with the vacuum pump to re-leather that. The pneumatic stack had its stack pneumatics re-leathered and the valve blocks rebuilt with traditional materials and components. The wind chest had its pallet valves re-leathered. The roll frames all came apart for complete degreasing, and any worn gears or bearings were replaced, and then all of those components were re-nickel plated. The crankshaft came out, the connecting rods were replaced, and the main crankshaft journal bearings replaced. A new drive unit was built with a new electric motor and counter shaft. And the only thing that wasn't done at this time was the pressure pump. The pressure pump had been recovered earlier by somebody. It wasn't too neat, but it still functioned quite well. And since that item's a pretty hefty cost in itself, the park agreed to put that off to a future time, which was fine. And also, while the case was emptied, it was sent out for refinishing. All the loose veneer was repaired, and all the joints stabilized. So when it came back, I was ready to start assembling the organ. All the components went back in, all the pipe work went back in, all cleaned with their stoppers re-leathered. And finally I could fire it up and then proceed to regulate the action and regulate the pipe work and tune it, install the percussions and get those regulated so that it was finally making music again. At the end of '78, it was time to bring the organ back to the park and put it back where it had always been, as it sits behind me. So in 1978, the organ once again played at Glen Echo Park and played its original music for the first time since 1934, and it's played and sounded as it did when it first arrived here in 1926. A very proud moment. Now I think we'll go around to the back side and continue the talk. We'll have a brief musical interlude while I move around to the back. Here's a picture showing the organ chassis without the facade on. Also, the selection that we'll be playing is Sousa March, the U.S. Field Artillery March. This is significant to me because it's the first song I remember hearing in 1971. It was being played on a Caliola roll, but it is this music. So I'll see you in just a minute. Okay, here we are at the back of the organ. I've removed the panels so that you can see the different components. The organ is running right now with the music disengaged. You can see the drive unit, which turns the large pulley. That turns the crankshaft in the organ, which uses the connecting rods to pump the air into the organ. The vacuum pump is in the top and the pressure pump is in the bottom. Now the other components, again, the pressure pump, we have the wind chest, the organ pipes sit on the wind chest. This unit is the pneumatic stack. We have the roll frames, all the organ pipes are behind this area facing front, the vacuum pump in the top, and of course, as I said, the crankshaft is over in this part. Two roll frames. This organ has the Wurlitzer duplex system. On a band organ with a single roll frame, once the music plays, the roll has to rewind. On a carousel, silence is deadly, so during rewind, the organ is silent. Wurlitzer and other companies developed the duplex system so that one roll can play while the other rewinds, thereby giving the kiddies continuous music. Now, these organs are designed so that most of the components can come out the back for service or repair. In 1994, the leather on the pressure pump finally gave out and had to take that out and recover it. In 2006, the leather on the pallet valves of the wind chest gave out. Unfortunately, that's the only component in the organ that can't be removed without complete disassembly of the instrument. So for the second time, the organ had to come out and go to my shop in Baltimore, be dismantled, and allow me to redo the wind chest. I took advantage of that time to give the pipework a thorough cleaning and the rest of the organ. I rebuilt the orchestra bell unit at that time and replaced a few other parts that were beginning to wear. So in 2017, that work was done, and we moved the organ back down to the park and back in place so the organ was ready for the summer season. Now, the organ had one major catastrophe since I've been here. In 1989, the crankshaft broke. That effectively killed the organ. So what are you going to do? You can't exactly call Wurlitzer and order a replacement crankshaft for a 165 organ. They had been out of business for years. So I got on the phone and started making phone calls and ended up talking to Jim Wells again over in Virginia. Jim, turns out, had an original casting pattern from Wurlitzer for the 165 crankshaft. And he had blanks cast from this pattern, and they were available. So great. I bought one of these blanks and had it machined to specification, put it back in the organ, and it seemed to work fine, and I thought we were home free. Well, we were for 10 years, but in 1999, the same crankshaft broke again. I learned at that point that the alloy used for that blank casting was magnesium bronze, a strong material, but perhaps not the best alloy for this application. So I talked with Jim. I was able to borrow the casting pattern and have a new one made in cast iron. Had that machined and put back in the organ, and that's been running just fine ever since. Long may it last. Incidentally, in later years, I was able to acquire that casting pattern, and I've since donated it to the park. So if problems should ever arise, we'll be one step ahead of the game. Let's hope we don't need that. I come down about twice a year to tune the organ. As you may know, organ pipes are temperature sensitive for tuning, and the temperature in the carousel building can vary from 60 degrees in the springtime to over 100 in the summertime, and as little as a 5-degree difference can make a noticeable difference in tuning. So I retune it for the season and try to reach a happy medium for the entire playing season. I'm only about an hour away, so if any problems do arise, I can usually get here in the next day or so and take care of it. I moved the organ 1/3 time since I've been here, and that was in 2019. The organ house in which the organ sits had some major structural problems and required complete replacement. So I dismantled the organ and it went into storage in a warehouse of a local fine arts moving and storage company. And when the work on the organ house was completed in 2017, in 2020, the organ was brought back and reinstalled here in hopes of operating for the 2020 summer season. But as you know, the COVID pandemic put an end to that. So the organ remained here, and by the time you watch this video, will have been playing for the 2021 season. I should also mention about the facade restoration. Several years ago, the facade was restored by Rosa Patton. Rosa is one of the finest artists in the country for carousel paint restoration and organ facade restoration. She very carefully scrapes down through the many layers of accumulated paint down to the original scenery. She in-paints, restores the original scenery, and then determines the color and design of the rest of the facade, and completely repaints the decorations, and it becomes a true work of art. Here's a photograph showing the finished facade. It's truly a magnificent piece. Thank you, Rosa. That's about all I have for the moment. I think we're going to switch over to the live question and answer session now. I'm proud to have been here for the last 50 years and taken care of this organ. I hope that whoever takes over after me will have as much appreciation of it as I. Thank you for tuning in.
Okay, and let me see if I can get Durward's camera going here. We'll get him to let's get his video started. That was a great video. Let me have him unmute there too. All right, Durward, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, fantastic. Well, we've got some comments, some questions coming in here. Again, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A button, and we will get to as many of those as we can. All right. First of all, one that was answered in the video, but maybe you can elaborate a little bit more. Someone asks, is the band organ playing MIDI or rolls? Obviously, there's rolls in there. Can you talk a little bit more about those? Are they there's two in there. Can they be swapped out? Are there other ones available?
Absolutely no MIDI in this organ. I wouldn't let it anywhere close. No, it plays its two original roll frames with original perforated paper music, just like it did when it left the factory. As I said, it has two roll frames so that one can play while the other rewinds, thereby giving continuous music for the carousel.
Okay. And I've had a couple questions come in about your past. So how did you get into restoration work, and how did you learn all of these fantastic skills?
Well, I think I was about 12 years old when I got interested in church organs. I saw a pipe organ installed in my church in Kentucky and was immediately bitten by the bug. And it became a hobby. I ended up building a small pipe organ in my parents' garage out of used pipes and parts, and tried to learn how to play it, but quickly realized that wasn't where my talents were. So I discovered player organs and pursued that aspect of pipe organs, and kept as a hobby all through high school, and then summer jobs in college. I worked with two different organ companies doing first installation and then rebuilding in their shops, and was very fortunate right out of college to get a job at the Smithsonian, taking care of their Music Machines American Style exhibit, and stayed there for 3 years until that exhibit closed, and struck out on my own, renting shop space in Alexandria, Virginia. And finally, I decided I wanted to buy a house, so I discovered Baltimore, and I bought a big barn of a place there that I could live and work in at the same time. And I've been doing that ever since.
Okay. Um, you had mentioned at the beginning there were several smaller organs. What happened to those when the park upgraded?
We don't really know. Most likely they were traded in on the next larger model. All these organs have serial numbers, and uh, I didn't try to track down the 153 organ because there are just too many of those surviving. But there are only a few of the 157 organs, and all their serial numbers are known, and they are not the same number as the one that came to Glen Echo. So it most likely no longer exists. I should mention that the Wurlitzer shipping list has survived, and it lists all the organs shipped out since about 1915, their serial numbers and where they originally went. So it's a fascinating document.
Okay. Let's see so the next question I have here is, how did you transport the organ to your workshop?
Well, takes a big truck and several strong men to roll it up a ramp or get it on a dolly and move it to a lift gate to get it up. But with enough manpower and a strong enough lift gate, you can. It's not a problem.
How much does the organ weigh? Do you know?
Oh, I would guess around 1,000 pounds. I may be off, but that's just a guess. It's not light.
Doesn't look like it. Okay, so the next question is, has the organ been electric for its whole life?
Yes, yes, it has.
Okay. I'm trying to work through here because there's a lot of repeating questions here. A lot of people have questions about where you learned and which you've answered. Let's see. So how many roles does the park have, and how often are they changed out?
Well, they've been very fortunate in the role department. Playwright company has made, I don't know, a couple of hundred roles, and the park has gotten every one that's playwright has made, plus some other sources have made roles, and the park has gotten those. So between donors and the park, they have a great selection of music. And the carousel operator changes the role frequently. He looks after the organ daily and has to hear it daily. So he puts on music to keep himself entertaining and to keep the public entertained. There's a lot of music to choose from.
Okay. Can you explain a little bit more about how the reels work? Obviously, they've got holes in them that we saw in the video, but how does the organ interpret those holes?
Okay, I'll try to say that in a nutshell. The paper roll with its perforations passes across a brass bar called the tracker bar. The tracker bar has, in this case, 75 holes in it. And these holes are connected with tubing to the pneumatic stack, which operates on vacuum pressure. The pneumatic stack is what opens the valves to the pipes and causes them to speak. Now, when a perforation comes up in the paper roll, it uncovers one of the holes in the tracker bar, and that lets vacuum escape, which triggers a pneumatic relay in the pneumatic stack to cause one of the notes to play or another function in the organ to operate. So it's vacuum technology. It's sort of a late 1890s technology. There's
Okay.
mud.
That's the short answer to a long story, I'm sure. How durable are the reels? Have they ever torn or stretched to the point where they can't play?
Well, they don't stretch, but they can tear it with careless handling. And eventually the edges are the first to start wearing if they're played many, many times. So it does take a little care in changing the rolls, but different companies use different types of paper. Some of the papers were more acid free than others and held up well. Still some original rolls that are playable, which is quite interesting.
Okay. Is there anyone still making the new rolls? Are they still available somewhere?
Yes, there are a number of music arrangers out there in this country and in Europe for the European organs. And you can have rolls custom arranged, or you can buy their selection of modern music. Some of these guys are just amazing. They're very talented. The different methods of doing the arrangements. In the old days, they would an arranger would have a blank sheet of paper marked off with the time indications, and then from a score of music, he would very carefully mark down the holes where they were to be punched. Then they were punched out by hand, at least one method, and this would become a master roll, which would then be placed on a production machine to make any number of music rolls. But today, with MIDI and the other electronic systems, the arranger can play the music via a keyboard into the computer, and it would be transferred into the right scale. And then this information could be connected to a perforator that would actually cut the perforations in the paper roll. Might make one copy at a time, or it could make as many as 12 at a time. So yes, it can still be done. It's few and far between and takes a great deal of talent, but they're out there.
Okay. How did you tune the pipes?
Well, wood pipes or metal pipes are tuned by adjusting the length. The longer the pipe, the lower the pitch. And most organ pipes have provision for tuning. They have either a leather covered stopper in the case of a wood pipe that you move up or down to make it flat or sharp, or if it's an open pipe, it has either a flap on top or a slide to adjust the length and hence the pitch. The reed pipes have a vibrating brass tongue. The tongue's length determines the pitch, and there's a tuning wire that you tap up or down just a hair one way or the other to control the length of the reed and the pitch of the pipe. Now, band organs, any organ is tuned to a certain standard pitch. For example, A440. This organ, being as old as it is the standard is A435. So if you're starting from scratch, you tune one pipe to that. You set a temperament on one set of pipes to that pitch, and then tune the rest of the organ to that set of pipes. Now there are electronic tuning aids that make it a lot easier, especially on a band organ without a keyboard. Band organs have test rolls, which you put on the roll frame and can move manually one direction or another to play the different functions and to play the different notes and test the different functions of the organ.
Okay. The next question I have here is, how long does the average roll play?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know, 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes. They're multi-tune rolls, usually have 8 to 10 songs per roll.
Okay. This one, I don't want to say it might be sacrilegious, but it's an interesting question. Could a keyboard ever be attached to the organ to permit live playing?
Well, anything's possible. But remember, I said that the organ is not chromatic, so you'd have a number of keys on your keyboard that didn't do anything. Some of the Wurlitzers, like the Caliola, the true Caliola, did come with a keyboard, and they could do that because it was a chromatic organ. It had 65 playing notes on the roll and not quite that many pipes, but they were chromatic, so you could play them by hand. But a band organ is not really practical.
Okay. I'm trying to work through as many of these questions here as I can get to. couple people are asking or had mentioned that they when they visited the carousel in the 1980s and 90s, they saw the carousel operator Max Hurley preparing music on rolls. Are any of his original rolls still around? And a corollary to that question is, what is the oldest roll that the park has?
Well, I think there are probably still some of Max's rolls around. You'll have to ask Bert, the carousel operator, about that. He's pretty much knows where all the rolls are. What was the second part of that question?
What is the oldest oldest roll that the park has?
Well, when the organ got converted to Caliola rolls, they no longer had a need for any of the 165 rolls. So by 1934, they were all gone. And when I got here, the organ was mostly being used with Ralph Tussing rolls, which were on kind of a brownish, tannish colored paper. And I don't recall seeing anything much earlier than the 50s here, including a terrible roll of deep purple. But and those rolls are no longer with the organ at all. So all the park has now are playwright recuts of 165 rolls and other companies' recuts.
Okay. How many other similar band organs exist in the U.S.? Are you aware of how many were made? I guess would be the next
Well,
first question.
all that information is in the Wurlitzer shipping list. Of the 165 organs, I think they made only 24 of those. And of those 24, only 11 survive today. Now, they made other organs that played 165 rolls, but they were not true 165 organs. Total number of organs, at least 1,000. The serial numbers go up into the 4,000 range, but that could include many other things as well as organs. So, but they're the most common band organ in America. They made a lot of them.
Okay. What are some of the more finicky parts of the organ? What was the easiest thing to replace, I guess? What was the hardest and easiest parts of restoring the organ?
Well, it was very disappointing to have to take the organ back to my shop in Baltimore a second time to redo the wind chest again. But the leather on the pallet valves went bad, and you can't do that in place. I guess the easiest thing, I don't think any of it's easy. It just takes a lot of time and patience. And it seems like the older I get, the heavier all the components get. So it's something I have to deal with.
Okay. And then I have a lot of people asking if you have an apprentice or a Durward Jr. Of some sort who is working to step into your shoes in the future.
No, I do not. Looking back on it, perhaps I should have, but I've always preferred to work by myself and make sure everything's done exactly the way I feel it should be. I do have a dog.
Okay. Do you take your dog with you on your trips?
I do.
Okay.
He travels all over the country with me when I go to service the organs. He's a good little traveler. He was with me when I made the video, but didn't make an appearance.
What's the dog's name?
His name's Buddy.
Buddy.
Okay. I could see his leash in the corner of the video. It was moving around, but I couldn't see him.
I guess he doesn't really have the dexterity to do
No.
what you do.
No.
Okay, let's see. Trying to see if there's any that we've. I'm trying to get to as many as we can. Can you talk a little bit more about your restoration work? Do you work on other organs? I have someone who says that they have an organ they are interested in getting fixed. So, what's the best way for them to contact you?
Well, I can give you my email address at some point, maybe before we sign off. I'll give you that. I work on any type of self-playing organ. I don't do piano work. I don't work on violin machines, just band organs and orchestrions. Of course, band organs are like the organ here at the park, but an orchestrion is like an indoor band organ, we should say. It's a self-playing pipe organ or piano-based machine that plays either a pin cylinder or a music roll. And they came in many different sizes and found their markets in commercial locations like a restaurant, a bar, or a hotel lobby. But many of them went into private homes of the period, of those that could afford them. And I've specialized in orchestrions by the firm of Michael Velte and Sons. It's a German orchestrion builder who incidentally, they were the first to develop perforated paper roll to play an organ, which became the industry standard later on. That was about 1883. So yeah, if you're interested in having a band organ restored, we can talk.
Okay, we can. Yeah, we'll definitely get your email up, or at least we can verbally say it. I don't know if I can get a slide up or anything, but
yeah, if I can't do it, I can certainly refer you to somebody.
Okay, and you can always, the gentleman who asked for that, you can always reach out to me, mgagel@montgomeryhistory.org, and I can get you in touch with Durward. That's not a problem at all. Let's see. Someone asks, see if I can, actually, I kind of lost it. Where'd it go? I apologize. Oh, are there any, I am so sorry. I lost the question. I'll go on to the next one. How did you fashion the percussion that had deteriorated? Can you talk a little bit more about that type of work?
Well, the actions, the device that actually moves the castanets or strikes the triangle, that's the main thing that had to be fabricated. I mean, you can buy a couple of pairs of castanets at any music store, or a triangle or a crash cymbal, but the mechanism that moves these, that's what had to be reproduced. And by visiting other organs and knowing how Wurlitzer built things, it was an easy matter to ascertain exactly what was there and just make it. You know, you have to have a woodworking shop and a metalworking shop to make these parts. But that's one of the things that I have to do, is reproduce missing parts in all these organs. And each company had their own method and design of doing it. So if you don't have one in front of you, you have to do a little bit of research so you can proceed with the reproduction.
Okay, we're going to start wrapping up here shortly, because we're getting up towards 8:30 here. But the other question I have here is, someone says, is the Museum of Musical Instruments in Scottsdale, Arizona, has an orchestron. Are you aware of any publicly available examples locally?
Museums, I guess the closest one would be the American Treasures Museum up in, they're up in the Delaware area. There are a number of museums across the country, and a listing of those could be found online at the Musical Box Society International's website, I would think. But there are a number of private collections around this area, but no museums that I know of.
Okay, and this might actually be more of a question for Emily, but Durward, you might be able to answer it. Someone asked if there's a CD or other collection of the music that was playing. Can you talk a little bit more about that music and whether or not it's publicly available?
Of the Glen Echo organ?
Yes, or just if this music is available in general.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of music available. Over the years, we've had several recording projects at Glen Echo, the earliest being probably in the early 80s, and the end result was an LP. Kind of a forgotten technology, I'm afraid. But then there were a number of cassette recordings made available. And I don't know if there's anything available on compact disc today or not. Do you know, Emily?
Emily, if you're there, she might have had to step away, but if she's there, maybe she can answer that.
So I'll just chime in and just say we don't have anything available for sale at the moment, although I am seeing a lot of interest. So we will definitely look into that. But I would encourage everyone to just come hear it live, obviously, and come by the park.
Yeah, I'm sure a CD or any sort of recording would probably pale in comparison to actually hearing and seeing the whole machine work. I haven't yet been able to get out there myself, but I'm really looking forward to that. So,
It's a
um,
treat.
the last question, I'm just going to wrap things up here, is how often are the player roles changed, and who does that?
Bert Kinney, the carousel operator, usually changes the roles, and he changes them frequently. As I said, he has to listen to it day in and day out. So he changes them so to give himself some variety and also give the public variety.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to wrap things up there. I know that I apologize that I wasn't able to get to every single question. There's just so many of them. Um, but Durwood, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you? Go ahead if you want to just say your email. I will
Okay.
before you start. I did get that gentleman's contact information, so I can get that to you directly. But for anyone else who has other questions, how do they get in touch with you?
All right. I'll pronounce it first and then spell it. It's welteboy.st5@verizon.net. And that's spelled WELTEBOY.ST5, the number 5, at verizon.net.
Okay. And again, you can always reach out to me. It's mgagle@montgomeryhistory.org. And I'm sure if you want to get in touch with Glen Echo, they can certainly get you in contact with Durwood there. Emily, did you have any closing thoughts before we finish up there?
Yeah, so my background's doing something crazy. So I just wanted to thank Durwood again. Oh, I'm disappearing. Again for his wonderful talk, his expertise. We are so lucky to have him. I will also just pitch. We are doing a band organ rally at the park, August 14th and 15th, which is a Saturday and Sunday. So if you are interested in band organs, you want to get to know them, and also smaller instruments as well that are not reliant on anything other than manpower. Come by the park August 14th and 15th. It's free. Band organ rally just means that who have privately owned organs travel, and they're coming to Glen Echo Park. We'll be hosting several more in addition to the band organ that we have obviously at our carousel. So I encourage everyone to visit the website. We don't have any information up about it yet, but it's definitely happening. And we will have just a full weekend full of musical instruments. And I would encourage everyone who is interested in that to check it out. We're partnering with COA, which is the Carousel Organ Association of America, which is just full of folks who are also interested in band organs. So I encourage everyone to check that out. Obviously, like I mentioned earlier, we are open. Park is open, carousel is open, come by. I saw a lot of questions about rolls. We have bookshelves, cases of them that are displayed in the carousel for you to take a look at. And we also have a binder that catalogs all of those. So if anyone is interested, has time on their hands, come on down. Our hours are on the website. Come visit us. Come listen to this wonderful instrument.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Emily. And again, thank you, Durwood, for that fantastic video and for answering questions. And again, I just encourage everybody to get out and check out the carousel. And also, as I mentioned at the beginning, the Button Farm Living History Center, we're having a tour this Saturday. It's behind the scenes tour, and there are just a very few tickets left. So visit tinyurl.com/button-farm to get your tickets. And again, Durwood, Emily, thank you so much. It's been a great presentation, and we'll see, Emily, we'll see you in about a month. So yep. Durwood, again, thank you. And
my pleasure. Glad to be here.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening.